Daniel, I think we're ready to start.
Good afternoon. Hello and welcome. I'm Des Eichner, Member of Parliament for Cambridge, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Innovation Corridor All-Party Parliamentary Group. So welcome to really timely discussion. I actually had a question in the House to the Secretary of State for Transport, highlighting the challenges that we face in the two, and pressing them to think hard about how we improve the West Anglia line. So I hope that will lead to outcomes. But most important this afternoon, we've got a host of really good speakers, the opportunity to have a broader discussion, not just around the West Anglia line, but around the way in which we recover and grow the economy along the innovation corridor. So I think we've got a number of polls that we're going to be doing. So I think Faye is going to put up the first poll. Is that correct? Ah, right. So all very technical. Some questions to answer. And I think you can see, hopefully you can all see this on your screen, and you can vote, and in a moment we'll get the response to that. Chair of the Task Force and one of the authors of the Innovation Corridor All-Party Parliamentary Group. And also Alan has been working on an online figure and is going to address the meeting now. Alan, are you there?
Yeah.
Very good. Can we go over to you, Alan?
Okay, fine. Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to add to your welcome to everyone who's taken the trouble to take part in this meeting this afternoon. I want to acknowledge straight away, because I'm branded wearing the hat of the chairman of the West Anglia Task Force, I acknowledge that there is more to the innovation corridor than simply this railway line that runs through it. However, I make no hesitation in saying that, in my view, the West Anglia line is a major factor for the very many competing interests that it serves. It didn't take long for the task force, when it was set up after the 2015 election, with a composition which sought to represent all the different interests. It didn't take it long to recognise that for tracking the line between Coppermill Junction, just south of Tottenham Hale, to Broxbourne Junction was the only way of producing measurable gains for all the competing interests. You have Stansted Airport, London's third airport, you have the Cambridge Science Cluster, you have commuter demand all along the line, which, with the formation by local authorities of their local plans for more housing, is going to feed that demand. And of course you have transport to London, with its understandable desire to have a metropolitan railway in the ordinary sense of that term, serving the capital on a high quality and high frequency basis. The business case for doing something about the West Anglia line was, of course, massively enhanced by the Crossrail 2 project. It called for the reinstatement of the 2 tracks which were ripped up in consequence of the Beeching report in the 1960s. Yet the umbilical cord that linked Crossrail 2 and West Anglia Main Line appeared to be increasingly strained as doubts began to grow about whether or not Crossrail 2 was going to be accepted as a major commitment. Whilst it has to be said, at the same time, no doubts at all arose about the increasing demand on the West Anglia main line. That was a separate factor. I will risk saying that the only doubts, apart obviously from the expenditure, were competing projects from across the Anglia region and trying to persuade all the other interests in the counties that make up East Anglia that really the West Anglia main line is of particular importance and significance. Whilst I don't decry the other projects and certainly not in any way opposed to the improvements to Ely Junction, I fully recognise the importance of the east-west links. But it's always been a bit of a battle, I think, to get a united view throughout our region of the significance of the West Anglia main line, because for many people it was quite difficult for them to accept that something called the West Anglia line was actually in East Anglia. We suffered a little bit, I think, from that fact. Now, it might seem today a pretty daft exercise to be spending time and effort on this rail line. Crossrail 2 has been shelved. A pandemic still rages, and obviously that has had a dramatic effect on passenger demand in a downward direction. And the nation is still going through economic trauma with many doubts as to recovery. Actually, this makes it absolutely the right time. Isn't it said by financial experts that for success, you buy or invest when the market is low? I'm an optimist by nature, and in any case, a major rail project on past form will take 10 years. So you have to have an honest degree in pessimism to believe that our economy will not have seen a recovery by then, and we need to prepare for it and to help it along. So I would say very firmly, the economy will recover. We don't know at what pace and in which ways, but knowledge continues to expand ever more rapidly, and people will want to exploit it. Business breeds business, and the population of our country is also likely to increase. Certainly the population of our region is likely to increase. Secondly, people will want to travel once it is safe to do so. And I have no doubt that the resilience of the aviation industry will ensure that it does remain affordable. And you can't reproduce on a computer screen sunlit Caribbean beaches and so on. People want the actual reality of taking a holiday in those circumstances. Alas, the weather in our country doesn't always beckon, and therefore the short-haul visits to continental Europe are very much a favourite, and that will recover, I am quite sure. I've already referred to the fact that more homes are likely to be built. Every government that comes along is urging the local authorities to revise their local plans and increase the number of houses they will undertake to build. And then, I mean, above all, I think humans are gregarious people. I think parliamentarians in particularly miss the fact that they are not congregating together as much as they would normally be doing. You talk with people, you judge people by meeting them and so on. All that is very important. And I think while some wonderful things can be done, that we can have a meeting like this through the wonders of electronics, it takes some of the humanity out of it, some of the fun out of it, you might almost say, because it is the connections that people make at such events that help to progress matters. So where are we at? Network Rail has embarked on a rail capacity study for the West Anglia line. Hopefully, this is going to identify some medium-term improvements for implementation, I like to think, well ahead of a more distant target like 2030. Those of you who have been patient enough to listen to me on other occasions may well have concluded by now that I have a one-track mind. That's not so. I have a four-track mind, because I've been convinced by all the discussions I've had with the rail industry and all interested parties that nothing less than the four-tracking project between Coppermill Junction and Broxbourne Junction will suffice to achieve all the improvements to which different interest groups aspire. And for all that new technology can improve things, and I'm sure it will, what is needed above all else is the ability of fast trains to overtake slow trains. Without that, you can't run a railway properly. But you will now have the opportunity to tell me, to tell everyone else here, what you think is the priority which can be accorded to it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Lord Hazelhurst, and I think it's a very compelling argument. You certainly persuaded me in my early years in this place, and the challenge for us, I think, is to persuade government. So thank you. I think we probably see the result of our first poll. Goodness me, 100% agreed with the first proposition, which I have to say doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. Looking down at the others, I think one can see, it is interesting that on the second question, there are some diffuse, and we may pick some of those up in the discussion. How to get people back onto public transport is a vexed issue. And in terms of meeting our climate change targets, again, 100% support on that. So some interesting things for us to up as we go into discussion. But first of all, I'd like to introduce our next two speakers, who are probably well known to many of you, and I'm delighted first of all to welcome Jamie Burles, Greater Anglia Managing Director, who has been again involved in this discussion for some years. And Jamie, very good to have you on the call. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Jamie.
Thank you, Daniel. I was just
Jamie.
Sorting out the technology there. Sorry. Nice to see you again, and obviously good afternoon to everybody else as well. So I think I'm just going to say a few words, obviously, on topics. So here at GA, clearly, as you might imagine, we are and remain fully committed to the very, very best possible future for the West Anglia route, and indeed all who depend on it. So we believe that on the one hand we are bringing something to the table. So we're making good progress with the rollout of our £1.4 billion worth of new trains. And many of you will have seen them already on the West Anglia route. So they include the Stansted Express trains. So all of the Stansted Express trains are now being operated with our brand new Class 745 Stadler trains. So they started to enter service during the summer, and they have had a very beneficial effect so far on the whole of the West Anglia, because we were able to take the modern trains that were operating on Stansted, and now they've been replaced by the brand new Stadler trains. We've taken those modern trains and we've been able to cascade them. We've been able to move them onto other lines on the West Anglia. So, for example, a lot of the Cambridge services are now operated. A lot more of those Cambridge services are operated by the Class 379, the Bombardier trains that used to operate the Stansted Express trains. So there's been a beneficial knock-on effect from starting our introduction of the new trains, because it means we have been able to start retiring some of the older trains on the West Anglia. So everything improves a bit. Now, things will continue to improve over the coming year because we will start to introduce our new suburban trains, which will operate all over the West Anglia. in the second half of next year, which obviously felt quite some way away a while ago, but now the second half of next year is not very far away at all. We've already started introducing those Bombardier trains. A couple were introduced last week on the east side of our business, and the rollout will then progress. And in the second half of next year, West Anglia will see the first of those brand new Bombardier trains. And of course, as you know, we will be in replacing every single train that we operate currently on the West Anglia. So a very big step forward for the region. And of course, as you might imagine, with those new trains, significant benefits come. So the comfort of the trains, whether it's the heating, the air conditioning, and the fast free Wi-Fi, but there's a real gargantuan change in capacity. So if you think about the Stansted Express trains, they were traditionally operated with 8-carriage Bombardier trains, which had 418 seats. They're now, every single service is operating with 748 seats. So an almost doubling of capacity, which is really being felt by passengers, which is brilliant. They're faster, so their acceleration, deceleration, which of course will be important for infrastructure changes in the future and capacity improvement in the future. So acceleration and deceleration much better, and the reliability. So the Stansted Express trains have always been very reliable, but these ones are continuing to get more and more reliable and will at some point overtake the modern trains they replaced and become even set the standard even higher. And that's really helping GA's obsession with punctuality. And we've been making good progress in that region, but we need to make further progress, of course. But over the last 8 months, yes, we've had less passengers, but we've been averaging around 95% punctuality for most of the last 8 months, which is record breaking for punctuality in the region. So we are desperate to maintain that moving forward, to ensure that people can have full confidence in the railway. But, and something very pertinent to this meeting, of course, to realise the full potential of our investment in all of these new trains, as I said, better deceleration, acceleration, and speed, plus realise the full potential of the communities and businesses along the West Anglia route, we do need this investment to be matched with infrastructure upgrades, which of course we all agree with. Because rail, as Lord Allen said, we really do have the opportunity to help drive forward this economic recovery that is going to come. And of course, as well, support the very important decarbonisation agenda too. So rail has already been mentioned. We have to keep pace with the strong population growth and the housing developments, for example, that are already well underway right up and down the West Anglia route. So we are violent supporters of the Network Rail West Anglia study. Really important that it's finished promptly, its recommendations funded, and those recommendations delivered quickly, and that we all combined do the very best we can to speed up that rail investment process wherever we possibly can. And of course, those improvements, whether it's line speed improvements and capacity improvements, whether it's through digital signalling, whether it's through then more, as Lord Allen said, more traditional capacity enhancement schemes, the bottom line is that without these enhancements, then the line will fall behind and will not be able to keep pace with all of our combined aspirations for the region and the route. So rest assured, of course, we will continue to play our full part. We will get this world-class rolling stock project finished and in place, and we will work with all interested parties and all the relevant parties, most of whom are on this call, to help take forward this ever so positive and vitally important agenda. So that was it from me. Thank you for listening. So not sure whether I pass to Andy now or pass back to you, Daniel.
You can pass back to me, Jamie. Thank you ever so much. And what I should have said actually in introducing you was to thank you and all your staff for the amazing work that's been done over the last year. It's been an
Start my video. Can everyone see me? You can, thank you. So thank you for those kind words, Daniel. And yeah, I think life sciences in the UK has demonstrated its value over the last 6 months to a year. But we very much understand that that's within the context of our local environment. Unless we get the housing, the jobs, and the general well-being of our population, that's not going to be successful. So my name is Andy Williams, you say. I'm an accidental travel expert, largely because I'm responsible for moving AstraZeneca into Cambridge. Initial plan to bring 2,000 people into the area. It's currently around 3,500. And we're going to be based on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. And talk to one of Alan's earlier points, we currently 15 to 20,000 people on that campus, depending on how you count them. We don't see any barriers to that getting to around 30,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. So that growth in jobs, certainly within the life science sector, is likely to continue at a similar pace to that it has already. And it's good to see us, as was Sir Alan and now Lord Alan Hazelhurst. One of the things we noticed as we walked around the biomedical campus is it didn't have a train station, but it had a fully functioning train line. So we did wonder fairly early on whether perhaps a train station at the biomedical campus would be quite a handy thing to have, given there's going to be 30,000 people working there. And there's a lot of history about train stations in Cambridge, which Daniel will know about. And much later on, I got to talk to Lord Hazelhurst, and he was very, very supportive of the station, as you'd expect. His only comment was, can it please not slow down the West Anglia main line, please? And the work that's gone on since then has demonstrated it won't slow down the West Anglia main line. And hopefully we're expecting that station to be finished by 2025, or possibly a bit earlier. If that is the case, it demonstrates that where there is a will, Network Rail can move quickly, and perhaps we shouldn't be waiting quite as long in the future for some infrastructure developments as we have to date. That's a bit of work in progress. Primarily, first thoughts around the station before we really knew the area were driven by our business needs. Primarily, actually, connectivity to King's Cross, where MedCity has a very growing and emerging artificial intelligence community there with the IT sector, as well as the MedCity life science sector. The other main link for us at the time, from a business perspective, was Stansted, which, if you're going to have a global life science community in Cambridge, you do need that global connectivity. You need to balance that with your sustainability objectives as well. But having a sustainable transport link to Stansted would certainly reduce the amount of traffic going down to Heathrow in a very simplistic way. And then primarily from a business perspective, it's good to hear about the upgrade to the rolling stock on the West Anglia main line, because the biggest feedback we get from our international, global, European travellers is arriving and not being able to get a mobile reception, not being able to use the Wi-Fi. Do not underestimate how important that is, because business people tend to work wherever they are. So having comfortable places to sit and Wi-Fi has a disproportionate impact on their perspective of a country when they arrive in it, and they expect to be able to do those things. So we got the business side, but more interesting for me, I guess, was the people side, something we hadn't really thought about when we first came. And Faye, could you show the analysis we've done on people? And if you go away from one thing from this meeting, is not so much the analysis. Goodness, a big company have done this analysis is perhaps the one message. And what this is a heat map of where our employees live in the Cambridge and wider area, where the bright red is the high density of population, and lower densities, and the lowest densities being the green part of the population. So go away with that message, look at that picture and think, why on earth has a large company done that? And I think it's starting to reflect two things. One is it's a quality of life thing. It's more and more important to business that their employees have a good quality of life, and their ability to be able to connect from their residential location to where they work is extremely important. And secondly, a commitment to sustainability requires a commitment to look at sustainable transport options. And we subsidise all of the sustainable transport solutions which are available in the local area. So we subsidise bus travel and we subsidise rail travel. We'll not go, maybe we'll come onto this in the panel, but you can be quite geeky about this and look where people do live. I can tell you that they tend to live in Cambridge and they tend to live to the south and the west of Cambridge, but they disproportionately do not live on the West Anglian main line, and they disproportionately don't live on the train lines out towards Newmarket, Bury St Edmunds, and Ely. They're tending to live on the King's Cross line and areas closer to Cambridge. And that surely reflects the regularity of the services, the reliability of the services, not so much the cost of the services. And that's something we should take quite seriously, both from an employee using sustainable transport solutions, but also the opportunities for people to work at a company like AstraZeneca. If it's expensive and it's slow and it's unreliable, you are not going to provide opportunities for those who live on what we call the Liverpool Street line. So sorting out Ely Junction, making the West Anglia main line more reliable, quicker, is very important to us. We'd like those things to be sorted out as soon as possible. It was very positive. And like I say, it's becoming increasingly important for business, this sort of area. We are not the only ones doing this now. Where our employees live and how they access opportunity and how the wider population accesses opportunity is particularly important. And I'll hand back to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Andy. And that's I have seen that before, but it's always very telling. And I think the work that you and AstraZeneca have done around transport around Cambridge has been really terrific, and it's great. I think great example actually to people elsewhere. So thank you for that. Now we're going to move on to a Q&A in a minute, but we're going to have three short introductions from three of our guests today. Ellie Burrows, who's Route Director for Anglia for Network Rail, Andrew Summers, who's Strategic Director of Transport East, Alex Williams, who's Director of City Planning from Transport for London, and then let's do a brief introduction each. So I'm going to go to Ellie first.
Seamless. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for that.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. My name is Ellie Burrows, as you say, and I'm the Route Director for Network Rail in Anglia. In terms of a short introduction then, as you may know, that between 2000, we work in control periods in Network Rail. So in our current control period, which is our funding period, we're investing about £2.2 billion in terms of maintaining and renewing and upgrading the railway across the Anglian route. That's a 21% increase in the previous 5-year period. Looking to the future, we're progressing a number of projects, a number of which have been talked about already today. So we've talked about the Ely Capacity Enhancement Programme and developing the plans for Cambridge South Station and junction renewal around Liverpool Street and new stations at Soho and Cambridgeshire, etc. So there's a lot of work going on across the patch. We're really excited around the West Anglia Mainline study and the work that's ongoing from that perspective. That work hopes to conclude and publish in the spring. And then the next steps will be, as has been mentioned today, looking at how we make sure that the outputs of that are funded. And we are keen to work together and look at and seek support on how we make sure that that report doesn't go and sit on a shelf somewhere and become something that is used and drives kind of change going forward. So we're really excited by this event, the support that we have in the region to make a change and to grow the railway and the opportunity that undertaking that study provides for all of us in terms of how we can progress going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. And now on to Andrew.
Good afternoon all. I'm Andrew Summers, Strategic Director of Transport East. So we're the subnational transport body for Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Southend and Thurrock. We're a partnership speaking with a single voice, with all of our transport and planning authorities, LEPs, Chamber of Commerce, and importantly today, colleagues from the UK Innovation Corridor. We also work very closely with Network Rail, Highways England and DFT, as well as our neighbours, including England's economic heartland. Now, Transport East is a strong supporter of the West Anglia Main Line. Last month, we published our investment and delivery plan, the UK Innovation Corridor, and this project is a fundamental part of that plan due to its national economic importance and its role in connecting the wider region. Now, colleagues today have discussed a wide range of benefits already, and I fully agree with those. In addition, I'd like to reiterate how important this project is in our regional strategy to reduce carbon emissions. So government have published the 10-point plan for decarbonisation, the Green Industrial Revolution, with an aim for net zero carbon emissions by 2050. For regions like ours, with high car ownership, this challenge is particularly stark. Transport East published our Transport Decarbonisation study last month. It showed that over 40% of our carbon emissions in the East come from our transport system. Our future strategy must include mode shift to passenger transport and in particular rail. Across the country, rail accounts for 10% of trips, but only 1% of carbon emissions. It's a really carbon efficient mode. Our evidence shows that we must make rail more attractive to users, and this requires a customer focused package of investment. And more capacity on the West Anglia Main Line and Crossrail 2 is absolutely fundamental here to achieve that. This would create more sustainable travel patterns through better frequency, more reliability, and better connectivity to more destinations, which is what our growing population needs to be attracted to rail. Now, Transport East is producing our transport strategy this year. We're going to look at this in more detail, and we're already working with many of you here on the call on that, and we'd like to continue to do so. We fully support this event today, Daniel, and we really want to work with you to help secure the investment needed on this corridor. So thank you very much and look forward to a good event. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. It's great to have you on the call. As someone who's followed regional policy over many years and the emergence of subnational transport bodies and the rest of it, your introduction with all the various groups that are involved was certainly helpful to me. And I think one of the puzzles for many of us is trying to piece this all together in the absence of coherent regional structures. I shall say no more other than that I think that having them would be hugely helpful, and what we're doing in the region is kind of filling the gap whilst we try and sort ourselves out. So on to Alex from TfL, a city, of course, that certainly in terms of governance is sorted out. Alex.
Hello. I'm not sure I can get my video working, but okay, all right.
We can hear you, which is,
yeah,
no, I can see you. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my name's Alex Williams. I'm Director of City Planning for Transport for London, an organisation that I think most people know. So I won't go through what they do. My role in it is to look at infrastructure projects, policy work, strategy work, and analysis work to try and understand what's going on, and ensure we plan and have an evidence-based planning system. Two things that we're grappling with at the moment for TfL, and they all relate to the pandemic. It's really trying to understand what it means in the short term, and also what does it mean in the long term. And in the short term, we're an organisation where 72% of our income comes from fares, and that has been decimated as people follow the understandable government advice for that. So we are on government support to keep us going, but we need to shift off that as we get into recovery and as we hopefully get more people back on the public transport as that confidence improves. But we are reliant on government support at the moment. In the longer term, one of the issues that they're grappling with is trying to understand how travel behaviours are changing or have changed, because this pandemic has gone on far longer than everyone ever expected, but it's led to profound changes in how our city has functioned and how people function. You know, this conference online, lots of people working from home, lots more deliveries from home. And what we're trying to understand is what does it mean for the longer term? And in particular, what does it mean for business cases for new schemes and new infrastructure? The previous assumptions about growth and all needed mass transit, we have to revisit that and reassess that. And I think in reality, we probably have to be a bit more patient for some of these to be delivered. A good example of that is Crossrail 2. The government have instructed us to cease work on that, which we will do, and we will focus on safeguarding for that project. And that's a really important thing to do, really, is to safeguard it, because I think it's important that you don't overreact in this kind of pandemic, and that we don't abandon every project we've been working on. We need to keep them going, keep them alive, refresh and reassess them. But yeah, the business case for projects like that is still strong, and that growth is still going to happen in the city and in the southeast and in the West Anglia region. And we need to plan for that accordingly. I just think at the moment in time we're looking at, we probably have to be realistic. It's probably some of these projects are going to take a bit longer to be delivered, really. So that's what we're doing at TfL, grappling with the pandemic and trying to understand what it means for longer term travel behaviour change. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's extremely helpful. Very good. Well, we've had some fantastic introductions there. The discussion now open to people. I've got one question already in the Q&A. If people could put the question in the Q&A, or put up their blue hand, or if all else fails, well, I was going to say wave, but I think I can only see the panelists, so it's going to have to be blue hand or Q&A. But the first question, Paul Seaby from Broxbourne. Paul, would you actually like to voice your question if you're in a position to actually do so? I'm waiting, hopefully. Maybe not. Well, in which case I shall read it, which some of you will be able to see, and it follows on very nicely from Alex's point, actually, and the question I put in the chamber this morning around the sad, well, I described it as mothballing of Crossrail 2. It's probably more high-tech equivalent. Safeguarding, it sounds better than mothballing. But I was asking whether some of the 4 tracking schemes that we're looking for down the innovation corridor could be separated out. I'd be interested to know, perhaps, I'm not sure Ellie would be able to comment on that, but how practical some of those things are and whether that should be what we're looking for. But Paul had a specific, I suspect, Broxbourne related issue around what quick wins should we be seeking. For instance, would a new rail station at Tunford within the Broxbourne borough be one such quick win? So I suppose my question to people is, should we be looking at some interim solutions, because one fears that waiting for Crossrail 2 might be a bit of a wait. And I'm not sure who's going to volunteer to lead on that one, but I guess I might well go to Ellie first, if you mind.
I don't mind at all, thank you. So I think the West Anglia Main Line study absolutely provides us an opportunity here to work through some of these issues. There are challenges of forward tracking without Crossrail 2, which I'm sure a lot of people are aware of, in terms of where those trains can actually go to if you were to forward track, and the capacity going into London if they weren't taking the Crossrail route. So there are a number of issues to work through, both from that perspective and also the business case to be able to do that as well. I think there's opportunities to work through that detail over the next few weeks as we progress with the study, and to understand what's optional and what options are and what's viable from a business case perspective. We need to work together to identify those benefits and make that business case as strong as possible if we think that's the right answer fundamentally.
Great, thank you. I'm going to bring some others in on this. Alex, is Broxbourne within your rights? It's closer to you than it is me, I have to say.
No, it's not one for me. But what I would say though, is that within the London boundary, though, the fact that Crossrail 2 is not happening is disappointing. However, that doesn't mean to say that you stop investing in transport infrastructure. We've got a new station being constructed at Tottenham Hale. You've had the new station at Meridian Water and all that development happening along that as well. So I think whilst it is disappointing, it's not the end, and there's plenty of other incremental improvements that will happen on the line, or certainly the stations on the line, in the interim.
And sorry, if I can just add to that point.
Sure.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that point and absolutely agree that I don't think so. Forward tracking may be something that we need to look at the business case for. We shouldn't wait for Crossrail, though. There are other interim solutions that we need to work through and understand the benefits of, and not take this as a reason to stop, but to look at other solutions and what else we can work together to deliver. I'd
like to bring probably Jamie in on this as having a direct interest making trains reliable and on time. How important is the forward tracking, Jamie?
Sorry, I've just unmuted myself, so hopefully you can hear me. I mean,
we all do it. We all do it.
Yeah, I've only had 9 months to get used to it, so I think I should be excused. But I think obviously the Ellie is absolutely right. You know, without Crossrail 2, forward tracking is a big issue in terms of being delivered. But Lord Allen is absolutely right that there is only so much progress that can be made without it. And so if you think about the importance of when Stansted comes back, roars back, no doubt, in terms of over the coming years, we know how important that airport is for not just our region, but for the southeast. And their requirements are, of course, we know how strongly they believe in the line speed improvement. So the speed, the opportunity to have fast services interacting better and more optimally with stopping services. It's really hard to do that without having further capacity. So it is something I understand that there are challenges to deliver it. But it's something that we absolutely have to, I feel, set our sights on, because it's the one big thing that's going to be needed with regards to accommodating volume, but also the aspirations around having fast services which will reduce journey times, be appropriate for business travellers using airports and business travellers travelling to our great cities up and down the West Anglia.
Jamie, and I think John McGill indicated that he'd quite like to come in on this one too. John, did you want to add anything to this?
Thanks, Daniel. You must be reading my mind, because I don't think I actually waved a hand or said anything, but you were reading my mind, so that's something I'll bear in my mind as we go forward. But the serious point is that, of course, forward tracking is the long-term ambition, and I just really want to pick up Daniel's point. Jamie's point, forgive me, about the sort of interim solutions and how we might model those. One example being the additional rail capacity which Enfield has now got funded to support the Meridian Water project. I guess, sorry, this is also a question for Ellie, and it's how we might do, more of that kind of thing. So they're sort of interim solutions. I think the technical jargon is dynamic passing loops, so that they do allow us to make progress on the way to eventual forward tracking. And these are not overnight in themselves; they're reasonably major projects, so that by the time Crossrail 2 becomes a live project again, then we have got some infrastructure in place, and they are providing some of that additional capacity. So that was a point I wanted to feed into this part of the conversation.
Lovely, thanks, John. Now I've got a number of questions there, and because Councillor Eek's questions are related very much to what we've just been talking about him, I'll take those first before going to Tom Holbrook, who's next on the Q&A. Councillor Eek, from Uttlesford, are you there? Would you like to make your points directly?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, very good.
Yes.
I can, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think Lord Hazelhurst mentioned that the forward tracking at the moment is only being considered down as far as Broxbourne. Now, one of the things regarding Stansted Airport is the limited capacity of the line to take the additional traffic, and the new trains will obviously create a bit more capacity on that, but at the cost sometimes of the commuter line. Now, bearing in mind that Stansted has already put in an application to expand, and I'm sure that won't be the last expansion plans that they will go for. It's bound to grow, but there are limits, and the limiting connections at the moment are the rail and road traffic. And I was just typing another question, but I'll come on to that in a minute if I can. If we could get 4 tracking out as far, or even 3 tracking out as far as Stansted, it would give us the opportunity for the dedicated route from Stansted down to Liverpool Street. That would put Stansted on a par with Gatwick, and the growth obviously has the ability to match a Gatwick type airport. Now that won't go down terribly well with some of my colleagues, but for our region, it's obviously a good move and a way to go. So is there an opportunity to do that? And is the land available to Network Rail to actually carry out this 4 tracking?
Thanks, Derek. I suspect, Ellie, you're going to be in line for these questions, but I suspect also Alan, you may want to come on this one as well. But Ellie first, is land available for the 4 tracking?
So with regards to the land question, there are some quite constricted areas, obviously, along the West Anglia mainline study, and that would be part of initial study and development work to look at what's available and the costs. With all of these things, it's quite challenging, and there has been a lot of build up along the line. So that's something we need to do a lot more work on to answer in a very clear way. With regards to the second question, with regards to the Stansted specifically, part of the West Anglia mainline study does look at the doubling of the Stansted tunnel, which is one of the restricting factors along there. So that is part of the work that's being currently undertaken to understand if there is a business case, and if as part of that study, if that's something that we should be looking at.
Right, thank you. Alan, did you want to come back in on this?
Yes, if I may.
Not hearing. Oh, yes. Yeah.
The difficulty, in answer to Paul, is that every extra station on the 2-track system simply slows the whole thing. That's the knotty problem, which one has to try to unravel. And that's why I believe the extra track is critical. Derek from Uttlesford, he says not all his colleagues might agree with him. I can believe that on the basis of my experience with dealing with Uttlesford District Council over 40 years. But understandably, it's a very tender issue so far as that community is concerned. But it isn't satisfactory. The government of the day in the 1980s decided that they would have the 3rd London airport at Stansted. But instead of sort of doing it properly, and providing a first-class rail service there, from which plenty of other commuters will have also got an advantage, all it's done is slow things down. So the journey times over my time as Member of Parliament for the constituency just got longer and longer. And in the end, the owners of the airport realised that no longer were they having an average journey time of 41 minutes, which is how it started, but that average is now over 50. So it's not doing them any good, as well as if there's to be a good service to the airport, and that is going and fast as it can be, and slowing down everything else. But the passing loops are maybe a way of helping a little bit. If you get one train to overtake another, it's only possible to do that in about a couple of places at the moment. And the other thing which can add a little bit, I don't think a great deal, is the elimination of crossings. Crossings of all types amount to 82 on the line between Liverpool Street and Cambridge. Some of those would cost a lot of money to shift, but there must be some that one could afford to take out, which might find you an extra minute here, an extra minute there.
Very good, very good. 82. I'm not sure I knew that, but I know it now, which is helpful. I've got 2 kind of more broad policy questions in the Q&A. One from Holbrook, and one from Mr. Southgate from Essex. And I wonder if both of you were prepared to voice your questions, and it might be an opportunity perhaps to bring in Andrew and maybe Andy as well on the wider policy and public investment issues. So Tom, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks very much. I was just really struck by the map that Andy Williams put up, and of course, what we're talking about, the kind of point of transport is to integrate where people live with how they're moving around and where they're working, and we've seen that very much during the pandemic. I suppose what we're really bad in the UK is integrating thinking on transport strategy and the kind of investment that we make in infrastructure with ideas about sustainable growth. And we all know there's huge amounts of growth in the region. How are we ensuring, who's doing the spatial planning to ensure that the investment in infrastructure and transport is going in the right places, that it's well connected, that it's going to make the maps that Andy might show us in 10 or 20 years' time look much better?
It's a very good question. Alistair, are you there? It's always a pause. One hopes. Hello?
Hello, hopefully you can hear me now. With the spending review last week, there was an announcement that the Green Book business case assessment for government investment, particularly in infrastructure projects, was to be modified to put greater emphasis on sort of strategic outputs in line with government policy, rather than what's been in the case in the past, a more focused approach based much more on BCR. I'm wondering whether this shift to a more policy-based decision-making will help the case for investment in the West Anglia main line.
Thanks very much for that. Slightly unfairly, I will go possibly to Andrew. The Green Book business case assessment probably is not on the lips of every traveller, but I suspect actually it was designed possibly to help colleagues in the north, and it may not necessarily helpful to us, but that's just my view from a rather non-expert perspective. Andrew, what's your take on that? And then I'll come to Andy as well, perhaps to respond to the questions. Andrew first.
Sure. Shall I cover off? I've got an answer for both of those questions. If I quickly cover those.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, on the first one, so Daniel, this relates back to your point earlier on about the requirement for regional strategy and regional strategic thinking. And I feel that the work that STBs and the partnerships around here are doing, particularly around the subnational transport strategies, are particularly pertinent in terms of a solution here. So both Transport East and England's Economic Heartland, who are the two STBs that broadly cover this area, are undertaking their transport strategies. Now, we felt it's incumbent on us to make sure we're involving districts and LEPs and partners here, planning authorities, in developing those strategies, because we have a responsibility to make those links to planning, to housing, and understanding how transport supports those. I think in this particular case, it's particularly important. We've already got millions of trips taking place along this corridor, with 360,000 new people moving in over the period of the transport plan. And ultimately, our challenge here is to make them attracted to rail. And how do we do that? We have to break down their barriers. And a lot of the work that's taken place, the evidence case for why people have barriers to rail use, very much around pricing and cost, and also around convenience. How easy is it to make those rail trips as opposed to private trips? So part of the work we need to be doing with this integrated thinking, I guess it's not just within the rail industry, it's how do we do that integrated ticketing, that pricing across all modes? How do we support access to stations? So by bus, by walk-in, by cycling, by other modes as well. And how do we put the housing in the right place as well, so that people are naturally inclined to use rail as an option as opposed to other modes? So I fundamentally agree with that question, and the premise being put forward. We need to link growth, housing, and planning and transport. On the second one around levelling up, yes, it was an interesting one this week. So obviously the Green Book review took place. Strongly coming out of that was an emphasis on place-based decision making, the strategic case, and also levelling up. And I guess levelling up is both a challenge and an opportunity for us. Daniel, as you say, you know, a phrase possibly coined by colleagues in the north. Our challenge here is to identify what that means for us and what that means for this part of the region. Particularly along this corridor. Is it making transport more affordable? Is it reducing isolation? We have got a lot of rural areas within this region. Is it making sure that we have access to jobs and employment? There is a lot of jobs in this area. Is it about making sure that all parts of our population have access to that? So it is a challenge, but it's working out from us what the opportunity within that is, because as we all know, there's a very strong case for this project, and we need to be making it in the evolving language of government as well. So I think that summarises my points, Daniel.
Very well put. To reframe markets in the evolving language of government, I like that. Andy, do you want to come in on any of that?
I would. I guess I'd make a couple of observations. One is a point made around the stations themselves. We very much see the future train station as being a hub. We see station car parks as very expensive, and regrettably we have to subsidise station car parks, which is not something I particularly like doing. But sustainable transport links to stations to make them more effective hubs is certainly something that resonates. I've said I'm an accidental expert. The other area I'm an accidental expert in is I've noticed in our local area, Daniel, that a lot of the planning seems to start with where's the housing going to go, and then how you're going to connect it to the jobs. Perhaps less work was done into where are the jobs growing, and therefore put the housing a bit where the jobs are going to grow, rather than start with the housing and get the jobs. So it's a reflection of my own. But they're two interesting things. I think the analysis we showed actually supports the fact that where there are good sustainable transport links, opportunities for employment in high growth sectors like life sciences emerge. So there is an argument there from a levelling up perspective. Is if you have the sustainable transport in the right place, they will get used.
Very good. Thanks, Andy. I've got a couple of questions in the chat, which are one's very specific to a particular service, which I think we might answer outside the meeting. And Councillor Eek wants to talk about the M11 a bit. This is really focused today on the rail services. Perhaps we'll come back to that in a moment. One question I wanted to put to everyone, or perhaps actually not to everyone, but specifically to Ellie, is I've been on a lot, and so have others, about digital signalling and how transformational that might be, and how for relatively, I mean, these sums of money, one should never say they're small, but for relatively this investment, you get a very good return. Is that correct? And should we be continuing to push for this? And perhaps bring Jamie in on as well.
So digital signalling for the right locations can have massive benefits, and it is being rolled out in various locations around the country because it has the ability to both improve performance and capacity in terms of high frequency lines of route. It is important that you have the right solution for the right location though, and for some areas it isn't the right solution and doesn't deliver the benefits that it isn't the kind of golden bullet for every single location, for example. So I think it's very, very positive. It is something that we will absolutely consider as part of the West Anglia mainline study. I think the West Anglia mainline study, from memory, is due. West Anglia mainline is due for resignaling in the early 2030s. So it is something that would be considered as part of that resignaling, or would create an opportunity at that point, regardless, to look at what the best solution is at that point in time, and whether that and along with further investment, that might create a possibility for us, but that will absolutely get considered. I suppose, yeah, it is a absolute positive, but doesn't necessarily suit every location. We just need to work that through in detail and make sure that it's the right solution for West Anglia, if that's what you're suggesting.
That's a marvellously diplomatic answer. I've said one of the many wonderful things about being a member of Parliament is you occasionally get invited into the front of a train to sit next to a driver, which gives you a very, very different experience, I have to say. And seeing the 3 red light system, whereby there has to be a certain number of lights you can't pass, really brings it home to a lay person. how it kind of feels you make better use of the existing rail space. And I can't help thinking that there are some real opportunities there. Jamie, I'm a big fan of your trains. They're very high tech now.
Yeah, so Daniel, you're absolutely right. I mean, you and I have discussed before. I think it could even have been last year. We're big fans of digital signalling. I think, as you will remember, our new trains are all, as I describe it, sort of HD ready, as it were. So all you need to do is plug in a box of tricks, and all of the wiring, etc., is all set up for them to be digital signalling compatible. Most of you will know, and of course I will only describe it in layman's terms because I'm only able to describe it in layman's terms, but digital signalling generally will allow the trains to be 2 minutes apart rather than 3 minutes apart. That doesn't sound a lot, but it can, in the right location, just as Ellie has said, in the right location, it can make a huge difference, and you can decide how to spend that additional capacity. So you can choose to spend a bit of it in reducing journey times, or you can choose to spend it all in increasing capacity, i.e. the volume of trains that you are putting down the pipe. But there's all sorts of considerations in terms of terminus stations and their ability to handle an additional number of trains within a peak period, for example. But to cut a long story short, yeah, we're sort of very much in support of digital signalling. We did a year or so ago, we put in a proposal to the Department for Transport for us and an external party to fund digital signalling on the West Anglia. And it was quite a speculative proposal. It was alongside the people who are funding our new trains, so ROC infrastructure. So they have access to very large amounts of money at very low rates of return because it's pension fund money. So just to put it into context, we're financing our new trains at a interest rate of 1.73%, which is pretty low and compares with the 7% that we financed trains at 10 years ago. So the cost of borrowing, of course, has plummeted, as you know. So we did put in and you're absolutely right, Daniel, that in rail terms, the investment was around £1 billion, which again is a lot of money, of course, but in rail terms is not necessarily a king's ransom, considering the benefits that may derive. Ellie's absolutely right that more work needed to be done to fully validate that as a potential solution, but we do think it's got quite a lot of potential, yes.
I think I'll keep banging on about it in that case. Sounds like the right thing to do to me. That moves us actually very well on to the final question I just wanted to put in this particular section, and it goes back to that first poll we did a few minutes ago, where people were asked how confident they are that people are going to come back onto the railways in the numbers that we need after COVID. And Joe Tasker has put a question which is in some ways related to that. So Joe, if you're there, if you'd like to just put your question, and if each of the panelists could briefly respond to that very difficult question of whether we're going to get people back and how. And it's Joe's question perhaps related to that.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi there. Thank you. Yes, it's just considering the way the world of work has moved on and the way we're living has moved on in terms of technology and working from home, and looking at the 15-minute city, 15-minute community, bringing people back into London, getting people using transport again. I'm wondering, just my question is, will digital infrastructure and strong connectivity, so Wi-Fi, broadband, on trains and platforms be a priority? Because, you know, if you think everywhere's an office moving forwards, I think it would be a lot, I for one, would travel a lot more on trains to get somewhere if I knew that I could do my work without interruption.
Is that a view for various people? I mean, maybe Alex fairly early on, because I mean, London, crikey, I'm one of the few people that probably has to come into London regularly. and it's very different.
Yeah,
what's
it's a really
TfL's thinking on these things?
Our view is we are really keen to get people back, when it's the right time. We normally on a pre-pandemic we carry around 4 million people a day on the tube, and at the height of the pandemic in March that went down to 200,000 people a day, so really, really low. And we're back up now. I think today's flows are around 32% of normal, so around a third of normal flows. But we want, our message to customers is kind of we're ready when you are in many ways. So when the health advice changes and when the advice to not work from home and it's going to work when you go down a different tier level, then we do think numbers will increase. And of course, with a vaccine, as that gets rolled out, it will increase. I do think when people see the network, they will see a very clean network. They'll see a very frequent service, and they'll see a much less crowded service. The reality is, I've been on the tube and trains a lot over the lockdown, and I've never had to stand. So you've got much more room. The other thing we're putting out there is some of the research we've done about how safe it is as well. You're not catching COVID on a train. A lot of the analysis is about, we've done with Imperial Research, I think it was, is highlighting how it is a very clean and safe network. So I think one of the things we're trying to do is actually give people confidence for when they do want to come back, that it is a safe and efficient and frequent and reliable and clean way of getting around the city, because that's so important to cities. Because cities that don't have effective mass transit systems are not successful. Car-led cities are not successful. So we have to get people back onto these mass transit systems, but at the right time, really, when the vaccine is being rolled out in a big way.
Jamie, I guess as a train operator, you must be really keen to get passengers back on trains.
Yeah, absolutely. In very similar ways, of course, we fell to a fraction of our normal peak loadings. We saw quite a lot of volume come back over the summer, but then, of course, the tiers coming in, and then lockdown 2.0 has seen those numbers falling back. Similar to what's just been said. We are moving into a phase now of reassurance. So again, very similar in terms of we're ready when you are. And we've been doing various bits and bobs, as have other operators, such as proactively testing our trains to see whether indeed they are as clean as we are suggesting they are, and even testing them for COVID. And we've been doing that for several months now, and it's proven that there's been zero COVID found on any of the trains that we've tested, and we've tested tens and tens of our trains on a random basis. So very much into the reassurance phase. That of course absolutely more space, very reliable, even cleaner than they were.
It always happens in the end.
No COVID present. And then just touching upon, of course, the connectivity. Sorry, am I back, Daniel? Or
you froze briefly, but you're back.
I'm back now, so apologies for that. But I was just covering the digital connectivity bit. We're obviously aware of the importance to our passengers and prospective passengers using our services. So that's the real importance of our investment in the new trains. So the Wi-Fi systems and the speed of those systems is significantly better than the systems they're replacing. And in some cases, we're even working with BT to upgrade the line side telecommunications equipment so that Wi-Fi can work on routes where it traditionally hasn't worked because there hasn't been the telecommunication infrastructure. So we've been spending many, many millions of pounds with our friends at BT in putting masts in effectively line side. to enable that. So very much agree with the comment about the need to be able to be productive on the move.
Very good, thanks. I'm told we have another poll available to stimulate your brain cells. Do have a look at these, fill in, and then we'll go round the panel for some final thoughts. So let's have a look at these. I think they're slightly leading questions myself, but ooh. I've been busy trying to answer them. I've just seen at the bottom which says host and panelists cannot vote, which seems very unfair to me. But you're probably all trying to work out why you should vote for the proposed new Cambridge South station. Not that I'm doing any lobbying whatsoever, but you've probably had time to make your choices. So someone will magically probably show us the answers. Maybe. 100% agree on the first one. Yep. These are definitely North Korean type questions. Several seconds. Ely North Junction, very good. Oh dear. Cambridge South is not top of the list. Digital signalling, we've obviously made a strong case for digital signalling. Good. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Let's hope that Cambridge South Station is done by 2025, if not before, as Andy suggested. So thank you all for your contributions. We're going to just quickly whip round the panelists, going in the order Ellie, Andy, Andrew, Alex and Jamie, just for their final thoughts. So Ellie, as ever, I suspect Network Rail, loads of people asking you for money and instant solutions.
Thank you for inviting me along today. It would be, as we've talked about today, the West Anglia Mainline study finishes and publishes in the spring. There's an opportunity before then for people to make sure that they're feeding in. I'm sure there's lots of really good ideas out there that haven't necessarily surfaced today as well. So if people want to carry on feeding in those ideas to their working group members, then we can make sure that those get considered as part of that forum as well. So my closing comment would be, whilst we've got the opportunity, it's live, please make sure that those ideas keep coming through, please. And thank you for inviting me along today.
Very good, and thank you, and thank you for very helpful and open answers. Andy, back to you and your dog.
I'm not speaking to anyone anymore. The dog's been banished, I'm afraid. So I guess my closing reflection is so you've seen our analysis. We're pretty confident that 30% of our employees will use Cambridge South train station to get to the biomedical campus. And that's a huge contribution to sustainable transport. You add in another 30% will either cycle or walk, then you have transformed the way that the local area will be served. So don't underestimate the importance of the train. That's all part of the Stansted conversation. The other thing is people like to go point to point, tell them they can do something by changing somewhere else. From a business perspective, that's not going to happen. So very positive about rail, not very positive about having to change lots of times to get from one to the other.
It's a point well made, actually, very well made. Andrew, your review of the entire region.
Yeah, I think some of the questions that have been asked today are the right ones, particularly around how we integrate growth and transport, and what do we need to do particularly to attract more customers. What's clear to me is a need for some form of subnational thinking on this. I think we've got all the right people in the room to solve this problem. Transport East is developing its transport strategy over the next 5 to 6 months. We'd really like to work with all of you in developing that. I think some of the questions we've asked today need to be answered through that strategy. And I guess thinking about the post-COVID recovery as well, and it's turning the question around from what do we think might happen to what do we want to happen, and making sure we've got a plan in place to make sure we get the maximum benefits as hopefully we return out of COVID into a future that we're proactively planning. So an open invite, Dan, to all of us to work with us on the transport strategy. Already worked with many of you and look forward to doing so over the next few months. Thanks.
Thank you. That's really helpful and very, very encouraging. Alex.
From my perspective, I just think it's worth reflecting on the pandemic, and it's made huge changes for how we function as a nation and as a region, as a city in London. I just think the reality, I think it's easy for that kind of scenario to be to overreact and say, oh, well, we shouldn't be investing in transport, we shouldn't be doing these projects because everyone's going to be working from home. And I think it's really important that we carry on with these projects in these difficult times, really, because they are really strong in terms of the business case. The growth is still there, and people will return to these networks fairly soon. So I just think in these difficult times, it's worth just actually reflecting, actually, there's still a strong case for this investment. It's going to take longer. We're going to be more patient, but there's still underlying a really solid case for doing these projects in this part of the country. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. And Jamie?
Thank you, Daniel. Again, thank you for the invite. But the one piece that I'd like to leave with people, I did touch upon external financing. When you look down that list of infrastructure asks and needs that we just looked at in the poll, there's a lot of investment that's needed there. And I think we need to be somewhat realistic in how much we're going to get through traditional means, be that through government backing, for example. And we know that we're living to a certain extent in straitened times. We want to see that investment, but I think that in seeking solutions, we need to be open to new ideas. So how much can we get through that central backing that will be given to Network Rail, for example? Of course, we need to maximize that. We need to fight for that. But we should not close our minds, I think, to the possibility of external financing, which will allow us to pump prime far more projects potentially in the way that we were looking to externally finance digital signalling. Is there an opportunity to get a bigger bang for our bucks if we combine that traditional central government, let's say finance, together with some external finance, all at sort of rock bottom rates that we can use to pump prime our region?
Thank you. And again, a point very warm made. I'd like to finally hand to Alan, Lord Hazelhurst, for some final reflections on the next steps, particularly through the West Anglia Task Force. Alan.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's participated. There's been some very helpful and pertinent comments, and a very encouraging degree of unanimity has been found. Might be one or two quibbles as to, on the last poll question as to what was preferred, but by and large a recognition of what is needed for this railway and how so many things hang on to it. And Jamie's last point about external finance. Yes, you'll only get external finance if you have a very clear plan as to what it's for and what benefits it will achieve. If you can get that agreement on it, then I think those who might produce the external finance will be much more encouraged to back you if they can see what their money is going for, not just into a pot. Alex referred to digital signalling. I'm not a skeptic about it at all, and I think, yes, we should get on with it. There's Ellie, I think it was, who mentioned about investment in the early 2030s. Oh, for goodness sake, I mean, we could spend the next 12 years really trying to get on with it a bit faster than that. But I've always stuck with the view that it is the handmaiden of extra track, because closing the gap between two trains from 3 minutes to 2 minutes doesn't help you too much if the one you're is in front of you is going to make 3 stops before its destination, while you are wanting to, in fact, have none of those stops on the other train. So the two things have to go together. But there will have to be some compromise, and it's asking everybody with their different points of view what they want to see happen, to accept that in order to at least achieve 1 or 2 key advantages, then there've got to be some sacrifices the other way. Excessive frequency, if you like, the nearer you get to inner London, against those trains which are coming from Cambridge and the airport and Bishop Stortford, etc., wanting to have a quick and attractive journey to encourage commuters to pay up the increased amounts that are usually asked of them every year, according to government formula. And I think my last point would be, it is, I think, vital if one is going to carry the day politically, as well as with those who might be persuaded to produce some finance to help, that we are speaking with a strong single voice, that we know what we want and what its benefits are generally, and that we are engaging, I hope Daniel won't crucify me for this, but engaging the attention of members of parliament on a much more regular basis. There are all sorts of angles to be pursued, and it does make an impression on ministers if they're having to come in and do a half-hour adjournment debate about some particular aspect along the line and so on. You can always find the reasons to bring up arguments. We've heard many of them today, and what is important for this rail line. And then so we must bombard the members of parliament along the line to play their part. They must bombard the ministers, and if we don't speak up in a very clear way, then others will get the benefit. There are lots of things that people want to do around the rest of the country. The popular phrase at the moment is levelling up. I've no complaint about that, but East Anglia needs its own share of levelling up because it has all the hallmarks of being able to continue to contribute to the prosperity of our country, and the results of that will benefit other parts of the country as well. So let's stick to it. Let's have a policy and not forever be saying, oh, well, if you want to do this, we want to do that. And it's difficult, I know, for elected people, those in southern parts of Essex, those who are further away from the scene, they say, well, why do we want to spend the money there? You know, please come together, and that's the way we will eventually get through the government's armour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. And certainly you have been a great champion for this cause, and you continue to be so. And we will continue to put pressure on our colleagues within the region to come and assist. I would say that Oliver Heald was a call earlier. I'm sorry, very sorry, I wasn't able to bring him into the discussion. But there are others down the corridor who have been helpful and supportive, and I'm sure will continue to be so. But you're right, we need to keep begging. I should also say the Rail Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, sent his apologies, but he's aware of what we're doing. I think, as ever with governments, there are of course lots of competing priorities, but as you can imagine, I have some interesting discussions with colleagues in my own party in the north who look, from their point of view, quite envious at the south in general, and I have to point out to them sometimes that the south is not one coherent whole, and that certainly in the east we feel that we need to level too. So I think exactly as Andrew suggested earlier, we need to find new ways of framing our arguments within the terms of that the government is currently setting. And I'm sure that we've got some good people here who can help do that. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining today. The all-party group will be having some further events looking at inward investment and skills in the new year, and I very much hope that some of you will feel able to join us on that as well. Could I also say thank you to the group who support the all-party group and those other people in the innovation corridor, particularly Anne Lim, who chaired, but also Faye and John, who make it work, and without whom we couldn't do these events. So thank you all very much for all your contributions. It certainly reminded me of the importance, and certainly when I had the opportunity to raise it this morning in the House, I took it, and I hope we can follow up from that and get ministers to understand the extraordinary benefits that the strength of the economy in our region brings. As a Cambridge MP, I'm obviously constantly trying to remind government as that without the economy in our part of the world doing well, then the UK economy is not going to do well. And just of course to make the final point with Andy on the call is that without the science and tech and innovation that is in the innovation corridor, we would not, of course, been able to tackle the huge problems we've had over the last few months. So I do think that we've got a lot to offer. We've got a strong argument, and the challenge to Alan, to me, and to other MPs is to go and persuade the government that this is a region worth investing in. So thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you at an event fairly soon. Take care. Good night.
Good night.